Thank you very much. It is always a pleasure and a privilege to have the schus to speak here in Ra'anana, and particularly for the Ra'anana Kollel. And what can I tell you? The Mesilas Yesharim says in Zahiris that a Perek Gimel, a person has an obligation to make a cheshbon hanefesh b'chol zman u'b'chol eis. Now the Vilna Gaon tells us there's no extra words in Mesilas Yesharim. So what's b'chol zman u'b'chol eis? It sounds a little redundant, right? So b'chol zman is every time, and every eis is an occasion. So what does that mean? What that means is there has to be special occasions when we make a cheshbon hanefesh, and within that there have to be special times when we do it. That it shouldn't be a right. So what are the special times? So it's brought down in the Poskim that there are special times built into the Jewish calendar for making a cheshbon nefesh, for taking an account of our life. Every day, every week, every month, and every year. So every day is at the end of your day. When you do Kriya Shema and Mita, you're supposed to stop and review all of the people who maybe got you upset, and try to forgive them, or at least try to come up with ways to get even, whatever the case happens to be. I'm not here to judge, Or if you think you may have done something wrong, to give yourself an opportunity to come up with an excuse why it was okay, but whatever it is. But you have to, at the end of the day, clear the docket, so to speak, And sometimes you have a busy day. It's a little hard, yeah? I think it was John Ford. I'm trying to remember. It was one of the famous directors that someone from the studio came down. He was in the middle of filming some masterpiece, and they say, they're very upset because you're behind in the schedule. He said, well, how far behind am I? He says, 6 days. So he calls over the script boy and he says, how many pages do we film a day? He says, 7. So he takes the script and he rips out 42 pages and he says, now we're on schedule. You understand? So that's one way to clear the docket. You review everything at the end of the day and say, nope, everything's fine, no problem. But obviously you have to, at the end of the day, resolve the day. At the end of the week, there are those people, I sort of brought down both ways, either Erev Shabbos or Motzi Shabbos, that they take out time to review their week. Now, how you do a cheshbon hanefesh in itself, really, for a deeper discussion. We really need to discuss that at another time. But it's a time for reviewing your week. You have to have a review of the week, and the 7 habits of highly effective people. So Stephen Covey says, the 7th habit is called sharpening the saw. So what does that mean? So if you're lumberjacks who are cutting down trees, and they're so busy cutting down trees that, it starts to get dull. So they say, we have to sharpen the saw. They say, we don't have any time. We don't have any time, But obviously, if you stop to sharpen the saw then you'll be more effective at what you're doing. So this is what he's arguing. You have to take out time to stop and to be able to invest in yourself, right? Okay. So at the end of each week, at the end of each month, that is the concept of Yom Kippur Katan, that many people observe. They say slichos, some people fast. They observe it that the last day of the month is the time to review the month. And the month of Elul is dedicated to reviewing your entire year. Where have we come from? What have we done? This is not what I'm talking about this evening. But I wanted to start it by saying that I speak on behalf of myself, and I'm sure everybody else here, that if we make a cheshbon hanefesh and we look over the past year, we owe a tremendous hakaras hatov to Rabbi Horowitz and the Ra'anana Kollel for all of the wonderful work that they do for us on a regular basis. I know I personally feel that. I have the schus to be able to participate in the program. Of course, I'm only one small star in an amazing constellation of individuals, but just the amount of effort that goes into something like this is so tremendous. So on a personal note, I just wanted to start off by thanking the Kollel for bringing me out and for doing all their wonderful programs. Okay. Now, my brother-in-law was a rabbi of a congregation in North America. People will do anything to make a living. And I respect that, you know. It's right up above cattle rustling. But that's the one I went for. But anyway, so he explained to me that there are certain people who develop their Rosh Hashanah drasha, and then everybody else steals it, you know? And there are certain key components to a Rosh Hashanah drasha, and one of them is that obviously you have to review the year. And you have to go over things and try to find patterns. Obviously, if you can put things together, you know, then it'll make it easier for you. Now, sometimes the way you put it together might not be correct. I don't know how many people remember this. In the 1980s, Ronald Reagan ordered a bombing attack on Libya. They flew from England, the planes, and France would not let them fly over their airspace. So the pilots had to fly all the way around the peninsula in order to get to Libya. And they did their bombing attack, and they returned. It was a lot more dangerous when you have to fly that far, obviously. And as they were bombing the targets in Libya by accident, and I'm sure it was by accident, they dropped a bomb on the French embassy. Now, I'm sure nobody would do that on purpose. I mean, it couldn't be. Now, I happened to be someplace, I don't remember where it was, and there was this comedian on. And he said, I want to tell you how terrible we feel, you know, about the attack in Libya. And then he gives this hysterical laugh. He's just laughing and laughing, like, you know, because Gaddafi was like a real, you know, real perfect enemy, you know. And then he says, and by the way, we accidentally blew up the French embassy. Oh, I feel terrible. But maybe if our pilots didn't have to fly so far, they wouldn't be so tired and their aim would have been better, you know? Now, that's obviously just a coincidence, you know? I may have mentioned this one in the past, but I thought it was fascinating. If you make a gematria out of the ABC, A equaling 1, B equaling 2, C equaling 3, right? Then the word G-O-D, right? D is 4, G is 7, is 11, O is 15, G-O-D equals 26, the same as Yud-K, Vav-K. Means absolutely nothing. It's totally ridiculous. But it's cute. It's a cute coincidence, you know. Sometimes that happens, you know. The fact that the state of Israel was founded in the year 1948 of the Gregorian calendar, and Avram Avinu was born in 1948 on the Jewish calendar from the Bible, there are those who would like to make that connection. Of course, the Gregorian calendar has no particular meaning, so it doesn't really mean anything, but it's fun, they're coincidences. So we look over a year and we try to find what event best captures event or events that we can put together into a pattern. And this has been a big year. And I don't want to go into all the events, you know, but there obviously have been some terrible terrorist attacks, terrible tragedies, illnesses, fires, all kinds of terrible things that we're all familiar with. I don't want to focus on them. There is now a treaty that's waiting to be ratified, and it looks like Obama will have the votes, that would basically give Iran a very good possibility of developing a nuclear bomb, and they have not been shy about what they plan on doing with it. Yeah. Tom Lehrer, who was a professor of good for you. Tom Lehrer was a professor of mathematics in Harvard, who's not remembered for that. He's remembered for writing funny songs. Just shows you where our world has gone. But anyway, so he wrote a song once about nuclear proliferation. And he had a song that said, yes, Egypt's gonna get one too, just to use on you know who. So Israel's getting tense, want one in self-defense. The Lord's our shepherd, says the psalm, but just in case, we better get a bomb. So now Iran has one, and they're not shy about what they plan on doing with it, you know. And Obama, though, has worked out the best agreement he could. Basically, anything they call a military installation, we can't check, so they could just call everything a military installation. And one of the most important sites, we decided that Iran could police themselves. And they'll report to us if they make any violations. That's a side agreement. That wasn't in the one that was published, but the AP found that out, you know. As Jackie Mason said, a restaurant in New York has more stringent inspections than Iran is going to have with this agreement. So all of these things are very frightening, and so therefore, that's obviously not what I want to focus on. I don't believe that that is the single most important event of this year. And the single most important event, and I think it's really pretty clear, is the fact that Marvel Studios released Ant-Man. Now, you may not realize the significance of that, because I know people were thinking, they came out with a movie, Ant-Man, that's so important. What about Avengers 2? Why isn't that more important? That's a good kasha. And I'll explain to you what the difference is. The Age of Ultron was just an average, Marvel movie, made $500 million, no big deal. But Ant-Man actually is the end of Marvel Phase 2, which means they did a whole bunch of movies, Phase 1, whole bunch of movies, Phase 2. Now they got even a more gazillion movies coming out for Phase 3. And this year marked the end of Phase 2. Now, there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed, and maybe we will at a future time. Yeah. Why are we so obsessed with superheroes? Why is it that almost every superhero movie that comes out, becomes a mega hit? What is there that we find so attractive about that? Why are there so many strong Jewish themes in the comics? Superman was developed by Jews. Stan Lee of Marvel Comics is a Jew. Yeah, there's so many Jews. In fact, somebody published a book years ago called Up, Up, and Oy Vey, where they discussed all of the Jewish themes that go into it. Somebody once wrote an article that Superman is really a sign of a Jew trying to become assimilated in America. That's really what he's about. His real name is Superman, and he dresses like a wasp. You know what I mean? He pretends he's Clark Kent. He puts on the glasses and everything because he really wants to hide the fact that he's a Jew, and he wants to blend in with everybody else. But every now and then he can't help it. He just puts on his tallis, and goes flying, and So interesting, and that's an important theme. I don't know that we're going to go into that today. Yeah. By the way, for those of you who are not aware of this, I may have shared this once upon a time. Stan Lee, as we mentioned, who's Jewish, revealed years ago that Ben Grimm of the Fantastic Four, who is the Thing, is in fact Jewish. And he said, I thought that was pretty obvious, from the way he spoke and everything. But they wrote an entire issue about the Thing going back to the Lower East Side, to Delancey Street, and exploring his Jewish roots. Someone brought me that, I don't want to say comic, I want to say illustrated periodical. In any event, so I'm holding on to it. I'm sure it'll be worth a lot of money when Mashiach comes. But in any event, but that's not what's really interesting here. What's really interesting is the following. Of all the movies they made Thor, they made Captain America, they made, Iron Man, all the ones that they made, the one that he tried to make all the way back in the 1980s was Ant-Man. For some reason, he decided that this superhero who has a suit that makes him shrink to the size of an ant is the most fascinating character. And he was trying to get Disney to make it into a movie. And Disney said, we would love to, but we're already committed to a different project called Honey, I Shrank the Kids, with Rick Moranis, where he invents this machine and he shrinks his children down. This led to a series of films, Honey, I Blew Up the Kids, Honey, I Shrank Everybody, all kinds of different things, that all went in with this shrinking machine that this guy developed. Now, I can't make a thing about a superhero who shrinks. Therefore, Stan Lee had to wait 30 years till the effect of that movie, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, passed, it's in the consciousness so that he was able to make Ant-Man. Who would have guessed? He wasn't interested in Iron Man or Thor he only wanted Ant-Man, and he couldn't. Now, why is this? Now, I guess since I mentioned this, I should point out another major revelation that came out this year, and that is that they insist that Walt Disney was not an anti-Semite. Even though he lived in Orange County, even though he belonged to a restricted country club and all these other kind of things, but they insist that he was not an anti-Semite. And they try to prove it and support it, so I don't know. But that was in the news, so I guess he's calling himself not an anti-Semite by the definition that Winston Churchill used. He said an anti-Semite is somebody who hates Jews too much. But when I hate the man a little bit, that's obviously okay. Yeah. Now, Why is this an important theme that I need to start with? Well, I think the first reason, the most obvious, and that is last year when I had to give a eulogy for Robin Williams, I figured, gosh, I guess that's really my Rosh Hashanah, theme in Ranana is to find a major cultural, idea and use that as my jumping off point. But there's something more than that, obviously, and that is the concept of shrinking the din. What does that mean to shrink the din? Yeah? So let's understand this. The world cannot exist in din. That's Rashi right at the beginning. Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'sa'aretz. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to create the world in din and saw it could not exist. A world can't live in absolute din. Absolute din means immediate retribution every time you do something wrong. Yeah? What, when I went to school, my Rabbeim used to refer to as the lightning bolt method, I don't feel like davening. That's it. Next, And you wouldn't have too many people left around with that kind of a standard, I mean, when you read the Mefarshim and you see what the Dor HaMidbar were held responsible for, and there were very, very minute violations, we would be expected to maintain everything to the nth degree. We couldn't exist. So Kadosh Baruch Hu added in Rachamim. What is that process called? So it's not in the Rishonim per se, but it is in a number of the Achronim and certainly in the Hasidic Svarim and certainly in the Sifrei Kabbalah. The term they use for it is metikas hadin. You sweeten the din. Din is harsh, and so you make it sweeter, just like you do with a medicine. Someone who doesn't want to take their medicine, so you add in, sugar and flavorings and things like that, and all kinds of artificial stuff that probably will cancel out any benefit you have from the medicine. And on that note, I will drink my Coke Zero. It has enough preservatives that I'll never die. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nהיה b'ro. Anyway, so you sweeten it, yeah. But how exactly does that work? You're making it sweet. So what's the process over here? Now, that brings me to Rosh Hashanah itself. And Rosh Hashanah is a challenge. Now, Baruch Hashem, this year it's only 2 days. Only 2 days. Of course, it starts Sunday night. So you're going right from a Shabbos into Rosh Hashanah, so you got to make sure you do your cooking beforehand. And then, you hope and pray that people go away for Rosh Hashanah so you can use their refrigerator. Because it's just not, we were not made for this. You know what I mean? You remember in the 1990s when the Ayalon flooded? I don't know if you remember that. There was that unbelievable storm. And they said, this is a once-in-a-century storm. We didn't build it for that. And refrigerators are not built for a 2-day yontif. Certainly not for a 3-day yontif. You know what I mean? So you got to make sure you get all your cooking done beforehand and have everything all set up. And, and because, if you only have a Sunday, you're just not going to cook. It's not going to happen, right? So you have to plan ahead. I find that the cooking for Rosh Hashanah per se is not so difficult. What is difficult... okay, all right, if you want to go there, I taught my wife how to cook, all right? Because I'm one of 6 boys. We had no gender-appropriate jobs in my house. So I learned how to cook everything. I would do the laundry. I went shopping, and this cat Nodaris, my older brother, used to be able to, on his bicycle, pull 2 shopping carts and steer with his feet. I could only pull 1 shopping cart filled with groceries home. I did the shopping and the cooking and the cleaning and the laundry. My wife was raised to be a scholar because opposites attract. And her mother never let her in the kitchen. She was very possessive of the kitchen. So when we got married, she didn't know how to cook. So to this day, so she's taken it over, and she's a very fine cook, But she never learned the tricks. My mother taught me how to be a fast and effective cook. It was by the it's easy, stupid method. I would say, she'd say, put up the brisket. I said, I don't know how. She said, it's easy, stupid. Cut up some onions, put it in, put some garlic and paprika, and stick it in the oven. And guess what? It's how it works, And soup, I said, make the chicken soup. I said, how? put in the chicken, put in the vegetables, add water, and turn it on. Think you can handle that, And so I can make an entire Shabbos in less than an hour, everything. The cholent, the soup, the fish, everything, So when I say it's easy, it's because when we used to have a 3-day Rosh Hashanah, me and my son, who's almost 30, he would sit with me. We'd stay up all night the night beforehand and cook everything, And I don't mind the cooking. I don't mind the roast, and I don't mind the turkey, and I don't mind the chickens, and I don't mind the, all the stuff. The thing that drives me crazy are the simanim. They didn't have that when I was growing up. When I was growing up, you had an apple and honey, and it was good. You dipped your challah in honey, challah in honey, and you had your apple and honey, and that was it. And every year there are people who ask themselves, why do I have to make a bracha on the apple? I already made a motzi. Yeah. So that's because eating an apple with honey at the beginning of your meal is not part of the meal. So it's not covered. It's like eating a fruit cup at the end of the meal, or parva ice cream. You have to make a shahak on that, assuming it's a food. I don't know. But, but if you're going to have Jell-O, which is for sure not a food, you know what I mean? Do you know where Jell-O came from? They used to make what's called an aspic. They would boil up bones, and they would make this kind of jelly. And then someone says, hey, let's make it cherry. That's where Jell-O came from. Interesting. But anyway, so you have to make a shahako on it. It's definitely not part of the meal. The argument comes in, what if you have a fruit cup at the beginning of the meal? Is that considered part of the meal or not? But I'm not getting into that. I'm just pointing out that the apple is separate. So we used to have a challah and honey and apple and honey, and that was it. Then the art scroll came out. And somehow they found a whole bunch of simanim that nobody ever heard of before. Like gourd. Why would anyone eat gourd under the best of circumstances? Or leeks. Or my personal favorite, which is rubia, which no one knows what it is. That's why I like it. So if you look at the art scroll, it says fenugreek. Do you know what fenugreek is? That's chilba. That's that really spicy sauce they put in a green sauce. How are you supposed to make that sweet? So I figured out how you make it sweet. The same way you make leeks for sweet, because there is a takeout place that's owned by Hungarians in Yerushalayim called Beis Yisrael, if you've ever been there. And what they do is they grind it up, and then they add 15 pounds of sugar, And anything will taste sweet. I imagine even chilba would taste right. And the leeks come out tasting sweet, which is very, very interesting, The beets and the carrots, those are easy, you know what I mean? The rimon is very traumatic because the Chazal tell us that a rimon has 613 seeds, like a Jew has 613 mitzvahs. And I have a kid who every single year tries to count them. She has never succeeded. Because there's something else that takes place before Rosh Hashanah, at least it used to, and that is in the Peanuts comics. Every year they'd have the start of the football season, and Lucy would hold the football, and Charlie Brown's supposed to run over and kick it, and she pulls it away, and he falls down. He does it every single year, That's what would happen to my daughter. She would take out all the seeds, and she'd start counting them, and somebody would eat some. It happened every single year. And eventually she broke up with the family. But that's not important, just kidding. But the point is that it's very intense, simanim. So you sit down now. By the time you're done with the simanim, gosh, it's a whole different experience, So you don't even have the apple and honey, right? Because you have tmarim, you have rimonim. Those are from the Shivas Aminim. Those you get the baruch on them first. They come before the apple. The apple comes later, And then you do all the hadamas, the leeks and the rubia. So here it's black-eyed peas, in case you didn't know what those things were. Do you know how hard it is to shell those things? I'm sure you do. You sit there shelling them, and then you have to boil them for 2 to 3 days in sugar and keep adding more and more sugar, until they're edible and sweet enough to be able to use, They don't have that problem in Beis Yisrael. They just grind them up and add sugar, so it's not a problem, with the rubia too. But everything is, this is a whole thing by the time you're done, And it becomes a little fun, a little kind of slapsticks, It's kind of hard because, on the one hand, there is this concept of maintaining a sense of yira on Rosh Hashanah. Can you do that if you have children and there's a fish head on the table? No, you cannot. You said. Now, those of you who may have managed a ram's head, kol kavod to you. Yeah, we've never actually pulled that one off. You know what I mean? The fish head is traumatic enough for us, you know. And there's always one little gross little boy who wants to eat the eye just because he knows it'll upset everybody, you know. And you know, you're sitting there piercing it around trying to find like meat in a head, you know, fish head, you know. And it's not fun. But, you know, okay, but it's at least simana. What are you going to do? You'll go against it, you know? Things are not the way they were when I was growing up. You know, things have changed. And the truth of the matter is that it's really a Gemara. The Torah Shulchan Aruch brings down a Gemara where the Amoraim were talking. And they used to eat these things. And they would say, you know, Rubia, Yirbaz Chuyosenu, you know, and Rosh Dag, and say, you know, Rosh Zanov. That one's actually not in the Gemara. Rubia is, Korah is, you know, and it would go through these things. And the Gemara says like this: Im Kain says, since Simona Milsihi, you see that using a simon for a good year, and we should have good deeds, all these things, it must be something real. It must be real. Because you see, the Gemara itself does it. So therefore, we have this minhag to eat these things. And it's so interesting that if you take a look in the Torah, he says, and in Ashkenaz, they have a minhag to eat a tapuach and dvash. That wasn't from the Gemara. That wasn't one of the earlier ones. You know, it was added in later. You know, but the original ones, all the funky ones that we do now, a lot of those have their source in the Gemara, the Gordon, the Black Eyed Peas, or whatever it is. You know, these were there beforehand. So, what does that mean that Simon is a milsihi? That this is something real? What does that mean? I eat a sweet year and then it's something sweet. And by the way, and he paskins and the Mishnah Berurah paskins, it doesn't have to be only these. You can do it in any language that you want, in anything that you want. And so there's a joke, it's so old, I'm almost embarrassed to tell it, and I'm putting the emphasis on almost. Yeah, that there are those people who have the minhag that they take a piece of celery, and they take a piece of lettuce, and they take a raisin, and they eat them together and say, let us have a raisin celery. As Eddie Youngman says, there are no old jokes, only old audiences. But anyway, so, you know, but that's, by the way, you could definitely do that, you know? No reason you can't just have a raisin and say Hashem should raise it up, you know? You can do this in any language you want. You can do it with anything you want, you know? It's a simon. What's a simon? So I'm going to give you a couple of different approaches on how we understand what this is all about. Now, obviously, when you dip the apple in the honey, you understand that that's to be mamtik the din. Because honey is obviously sweet, and you're dipping it into the honey to do it. Now, why an apple? Did we ever do this in past years? Okay, so I don't have my apple with me. You'll have to go home and try this on your own. I've done this in the past. Yeah. Take an apple and slice it along the equator. And take a look at this. I have done this many times. Yeah? You will see inside of your average apple a 5-pointed star. And 10 little dots. You have to look for them because it's really spooky. But there are 10 little dots going around that star. Which means there are also 5 blank spaces in between the points. So you've got 5 points, and you've got 5 spaces, and you've got 10 dots. So Yud is 10, Hey is 5, Hey is 5. And if you look at the stem of an apple, it looks just like a Vav. Says the Arizal, an apple represents the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yeah? Now, if you have something called God and you want to eat that, it also equals 26, it's not a problem. But anyway, yeah, but he says, therefore, apples represent that midas chesed that's in Yud Kei Vav Kei, and you dip that in honey. What's the significance of honey? Yeah, it's sweet, so is sugar. And by the way, when the Gemara talks about honey, or when the Torah says Eretz Zavas Cholav Dvash, it's usually talking about date honey or fig honey. Yeah, it's not really talking about bee honey. But we use it with bee honey. What's the significance of that, right? Which we know is in Tanakh also. Shimshon comes and finds the bees making, he eats the honey from inside of the dead lion, So we spoke about this years ago. I'm not going to go into so many details now, but there is a din in the Torah called the Shivim Mashkim, that food that's growing on the tree can never become tamei. Once you pick it, it can't become tamei either, unless it becomes wet by one of the 7 liquids. Tropicana Pure Premium Orange Juice. Just take a moment. Okay, yeah, that's not a liquid. Mott's apple juice, not a liquid. Yeah, those are called mei peros, they're not a liquid. There are 7 liquids known by the mnemonic device of Yad, Shochat, Dam. Yayin, Dvash, Shemen, Cholov, Tal, which is dew. Yeah, Dalet is Dam, Mem is Mayim. It has to first get wet by one of these 7 things. Years ago, Rabbi Mordechai Kornfeld said to me, everything ties together. So if there are 7 liquids and there are 7 holidays, they must correspond. Yeah, we've talked about this before Pesach, right? Yeah, so water is an easy one. The Sukkot, we pour the water on the Mizbeach. We say the Tefillah for Geshem, right? Oil is an easy one. It's Hanukkah. Yeah, we light it. We eat foods cooked in oil. It's oil. Yeah, wine, it's Purim. Yeah, the special day for alcoholics to really enjoy themselves within a Jewish context. Yeah. The wine, everything's wine, and the Avudram says, because if you look at the story, everything took place with wine, right? Milk, Shavuos, cheesecake, which I make, thank you very much, as well as lasagna, thank you. Anyway, and a wonderful macaroni and cheese. All right, I'm not going to do it. Anyway, but all these things, the milk for Shavuos, right? Okay. Blood is Pesach. They put the blood on the doorpost. The B'damai Chayi, the blood of the Christian child we put in the matzahs, all these things. One day I'm going to get into serious trouble for that joke. I've been telling that joke for years, and one time someone's going to say, see, it's true. It's a joke, those of you out there. Anyway, so blood, dam, and the last one is honey. That's Rosh Hashanah. So it's not stam that we dip it in honey. What is there special about bee honey? Bee honey is an anomaly. There's a number of things that are anomalous about it. One is that if you put it on a burn or a cut, it heals it. It has all kinds of enzymes in it and stuff. The other thing is it lasts forever. They discovered bee honey 2,000 years old. And the other thing is it's the only thing that comes from a non-kosher creature that's kosher. What makes milk or eggs kosher? They have to come from a kosher animal or a kosher bird. Pig milk is not kosher. Horse milk is not kosher. Whereas sheep milk and goat milk is kosher, right? Duck eggs are kosher. Geese eggs are kosher. Chicken eggs are kosher. Ostrich eggs are not. Yeah, it's got to come from a kosher bird. I know you're wondering, why would I care? So if you have ever gone to Harrods in London, to the food court, where they have many exotic things, they tell a story that you can get anything you want in Harrods. And so this guy went into the restaurant and asked for an elephant sandwich. And the waiter comes back and says, the cook sends his apologies, we're out of bread. But anyway, but if you go to the food court, you'll see they have 20 different types of eggs. Little round blue ones, I assume that must be from like a bluebird, and big gigantic ones, and all kinds of different types of eggs, most of which, of course, we will never experience. But there's all kinds of things that are out there, as long as it comes from a kosher thing. A bee excretes honey, and it's still kosher. A bee, by the way, is not kosher. If you want to eat a bee, yeah, and because you're going exotic, You can get chocolate-covered bees and chocolate-covered ants, should you be so inclined. But they're not kosher, yeah? But the bee, which is not kosher, spits out this honey, and the Gemara explains why. It has to do with the anatomy of it, but it's something that's very strange. It's something that's not kosher, and it produces something that is kosher. And that's a very important message going into Rosh Hashanah. Because there are very few people who are perfect. Yeah? We all fall short, That doesn't mean, and that's why, I explained this once when we talked about the power of din, Why do we have din? Why is the Rosh Hashanah a day of din if we can't stand up to din? So the answer is that although we can't do everything, it does not mean that we can't do anything. And there are people who feel like, if I can't do everything, what's the point of trying? And the fact of the matter is that even if you're not prepared to eat the healthiest diet in the world, that doesn't mean you have to eat everything that's unhealthy. Cut out something. There were these girls took a discovery course, and they wanted to start keeping Shabbos, but didn't know what. So they went to Noach Weinberg, and he said to them, just don't go to the mall on Shabbos. Another person wanted to keep kosher, but it was too hard for him. So he said, just when you go to McDonald's, don't get the cheeseburger. That's it. It was something small, There were Jewish workers who used to work at the docks. And Bissau Salanta used to go to them when they were working on Shabbos and say, just don't smoke. You feel like you have to work, you have to earn a living, but don't smoke. At least that don't do, So just because I can't do everything doesn't mean I can't do anything. And Rosh Hashanah is a time where I can do something. And therefore, I'm like, on that level, we're like the bee. That although we may not have always been kosher, we can produce something that's very sweet that is kosher. Yeah? That's also the concept of the rimon, of the pomegranate. The Gemara says, like a pomegranate is filled with seeds, so the worst Jew is filled with mitzvahs. And they may be only spots and points, but they're always there. There's always something that's very special. So how do they work? Right? On the simplest level, it's the following. I told this story. When my father passed away from lung cancer, so the doctor came to pay a shiva call, and he said, your father lasted almost 2 years with lung cancer. Okay, this is 20 years ago, Hashem, there have been strides made. But it was almost 20 years ago. He says he lasted 2 years with lung cancer. That's very unusual. And he pointed to somebody else and he says, you see him? He would have been dead in 6 months. Because he doesn't want to live as much as your father does. Because you have to want to live, and you have to say it. You have to make an action. It's easy to say, I want a good year. I want a good year of bracha. Do you really want it? To make the statement. I'm a Kohen. So was my dad. And could be it goes back further than that. I'm not sure. There's a rumor that my grandfather won in a pinochle game, but we don't really know. Anyway, but he claimed he was a Kohen too. Anyhow, so Kohanim are sometimes called upon to do a pidyon ben. I was almost never asked to do a pidyon ben because I have 8 daughters. And everyone's afraid to give me their little baby because there's a good chance I won't give it back. You understand? So my brother, he really killed it for the whole family because instead of taking the 5 slayim, he said, you have 3 chances to guess my name or I keep the baby, I guess he took that from Rumpelstiltskin. But anyway, well, on those occasions when you do have it, the language is, you have the baby. And there's the question you ask. But my boss tvei, what would you rather have? Bincha, b'chayrecha, your firstborn son, or b'chamisha slayim, the mechayavti alitein li b'pidyon bincha. What would you rather do? Have the baby or have your 5 shekels? Before there was television, before there were computers, there were televisions. Before there were televisions, there were radios. People used to watch the radio, yeah? The number 1 show was this guy, a Jewish guy, Jack Benny. And he had a reputation for being cheap, yeah? So one time he gets held up. And the thief says, your money or your life? And Jack Benny goes, it was the longest recorded laugh in radio, yeah? And it goes on for a full minute. And finally the guy goes, well? He goes, no, I'm thinking, yeah? But is it really a question? If someone's going to kill you or take your money, it shouldn't even be a question. So you go to somebody who's just had a baby, a month after they've had the baby, and say, so, you want to give me the baby or the 5 shekels? What would you rather have? What kind of a question is that? So the answer is, of course no parent will give up their baby, I asked that question to parents many times. I said, would you give up one of your kids for $1 million? One time someone said to me, which one? But for the most part, I would say that people would not just sell their babies, they wouldn't give it away. So the mother carried this baby for 9 months, you know what I mean? And, and then had labor. And now she's been taking care of this baby for a month, And you ask me, do I want the baby? Of course you want the baby, but say it. Because it's important that you vocalize, yes, I want this baby, I had a brother, one of my first brother who got married, decided not to have children for a number of years. It was killing my father because he wanted to be a grandfather. But, my father was, was from that generation, And every now and then he would start yelling about his kids. Kids are no good, a bunch of ingrates, that. And my brother would immediately chime in, that's why I'm not going to have any. My father's like, what do you mean? They're my whole life. What do you mean? It's what I live. Say it. It's okay. Say it. You find this in marriages, It's usually the man, but sometimes it's the wife, And the wife says, why don't you tell me you love me? He says, I told you. I must have told you a dozen times. You know what? Let's say it now. I love you. If anything changes, I'll let you know. Okay, we're good? But this is status quo, you know what I mean? Not everybody says it, So that's why, my wife developed this habit where when I come home, she doesn't wait for me to notice things. You know that terrible pressure when your wife goes, notice anything? And you're like, oh my gosh, it's a new shaitel. No, your new shoes. No, I cleaned up the living room. Oh, it looks great. You don't care, So she doesn't do that anymore. I come home and she says, so, did you see I cleaned up the living room? I was like, yeah, it looks great. Great. Thank you, honey. I'm sure that was a lot of work. Thank you, honey. I'm sure it was a lot of work. She just no pride anymore. She just feeds me the lines. And I would say it. I just didn't think of it, And that's what happens sometimes. Say, I want a sweet year. Say, I want to have a long life. Say, I want to be a Rosh is enough. So one idea of the simanim is that you have to make a statement. There's another aspect. Yeah? There's a pasuk in Yirmiyahu where Kodesh Baruch Hu says to Yirmiyahu, make metal horns, because this is what's going to be used to gore the Jewish people. When I say that they're going to be, attacked by Bavel, they're going to be gored by these horns. What do I have to make the horns for? Just say it. So the answer is because sometimes you need something for the power to come down. What do I mean by that? Spirituality and physicality are two separate things. The whole purpose of a Jew is to imbue spirituality, physicality with spirituality, right? So a Christian says, stay away from wine, it's the devil's brew. And Epicurean will say, drink until you're lying drunk in the street, yeah? I went to speak in Toronto, and I saw this American guy lying drunk in the street. I was embarrassed, because, co-countrymen, And I slap him a little bit, get him up. I said, what are you doing? He says, not my fault. So I got off the plane, and I saw a sign that said, drink Canada Dry. Anyway. Anyhow, that's a brand of soda, by the way, in America, Canada Dry. Anyway, so, so some people say, drink to your, A Jew says, pick up that wine and make a kiddush on it. You mekadesh it, you take the spirituality, you take it and you put it into the physicality, you imbue it. So when we say, I want a good year, I want it to be sweet, taste the sweetness. Do an action where you're actually eating the honey, where you're eating the thing, and bring that into Maisa. That is the very strange Gemara in Shabbos, where Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to get the Torah, and the angels want to burn him up. And as you can imagine, Moshe is somewhat frightened about this. And they say, you, simple man, doomed to die, you dare to take the Torah from us, Malachim, who are going to live forever? So he says to Hashem, what do I do here? He says, hold on to my kisei hakavod and answer them. He says, okay, guys, you guys want the Torah? No problem. Let me ask you a question. It says, honor your father and your mother. Do you guys have parents? No. It says, rest on the Shabbos. Do you guys work? No. It says, don't kill. Do you guys ever get jealous that you'd want to kill? No. Okay, take it. Now, what was the conversation? So he says, hold on to my kisei. Why? My throne. Because the throne is what allows HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be in this world. That's why when a Molech tries to chase Hashem out of this world, it says that Hashem's throne, kisei, is kas. It's written as kas. His throne is not complete because he can't be in this world. So explain to them that the angels may understand it on a very high level, but they're not able to do anything. Judaism is about doing. You have to take it and bring it into the world of Maisa. So it's very nice to say that it's important. You shake the Daled Minim in the 6 directions. The Gemara says it chases away the bad winds, the bad, towel, all this kind of bad stuff, right? It's not a symbol. It's a physical action that actually affects the things around us. We may not realize it when we're doing it, but it has that power that the physical action brings about a spiritual consequence. So that's the second approach. The third approach is that it's a focus. So Yaakov makes a deal with Lavan, which Lavan changes 100 times. He first tells him, you'll get all the striped sheeps and the spotted sheeps. Then he switches it to the speckled sheep and the spurkled sheep and the splotched sheep, and he just keeps changing it back and forth, right? So what does Yaakov do? So he takes sticks and he makes them striped and he makes them speckled and he puts them by the water when the sheep are going to drink, and then they'll produce children like this. Yeah? Now, all of the Mefarshim ask the question, well, that sounds like it's not honest. And Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Sher says, I'll let you in a little secret. It doesn't work. Ask any shepherd. Would that be great if you could make designer sheep? You know what I mean? I'll make striped sticks and stick them all around, and I'll get striped sheep. Yeah? And that way I wouldn't have to sit there and dye it. It'd come out already striped. It'd be great. It doesn't work. So there's a number of answers to why he did this, but one answer is that it was all that he concentrated on that sheep, on that stick. He concentrated on the striped sheep, and he says, I want to have striped sheep. And that focus of his tefillahs brought about what took place. Yeah? So we have certain things that are there to focus. Tzitzis, supposed to have a blue string on it. Tcheles, Arismosos, Charatimus Komitzvahs Hashem, you'll see it, you remember all of the mitzvahs. Why? Because you look at the blue, and the blue will remind you of the sea, and the sea will remind you of the sky, and the sky will remind you of the kisei hakavod. So cut to the chase, put a little chair on the end of your clothes, and then you'll remember the kisei hakavod. I got to go from here to there to there to there. The answer is, it's a focus. You can't just jump all the way up to Shemayim. You got to go from point to point to point to point. And if you focus on it, then you'll be able to get there. Simanim are a physical manifestation of the bracha that you want. And when you look at it and when you eat it, you're supposed to be thinking, that's what I want. Yeah? It's an interesting thing. Someone just pointed this out to me today. You know, we add in those 4 little phrases to Shemona Esrei. Zachrenu lechayim, melech chafetz b'chayim, v'chasvenu b'sefer hachayim. I'm still available. Anyway, so you know that, and b'sefer, and ksov b'chayim tovim. All these 4 little phrases. They were added in by the Gaonim. Some poskim opposed it, because you're not allowed to add something into Shemona Esrei. There was some who opposed it. But we're makabel that, we say it, and we put a lot of emphasis on it. So this guy pointed out to me, you realize that those 4 phrases were added in by the Gaonim. But the Gemara that we just quoted increases. Yeah, say that the simonim, milsihi, means that when we eat the simonim at the meal, that's already back from the Gemara. That's more important than those 4 phrases that we add in. Because these simonim have the power to actually make it happen. And so how we concentrate on them is going to make that kind of a difference. So the Shem Shmuel says it like this. He brings a mashal. King says, tomorrow's my birthday. Anybody who wants, I'll give them anything they want. But if you ask for something stupid or selfish, then I'll kill you. Okay? I like to have a balance. Yeah? So what does he do? The guy walks in, and he sees the guy before him, and the king says, give this man the keys to the world treasury. Azoi? Very nice. So this guy's turn comes, and he says, Your Majesty, I would also like to go to the Royal Treasury and take out $1 million. He says, why? He says, well, I got a mortgage to pay off, and I got to buy clothes, and I got stuff to do, I want to travel, He says, guard, seize this man, take him to the dungeon, sentence him to death. He goes, whoa, the other guy did it. He says, you should have heard the whole conversation. The other guy came in and said, I want to honor the king. I want to spread your greatness. The king says, sounds good to me. How are you going to do it? So I'm thinking like an ad campaign. I'm looking at billboards, you know what I mean? Maybe some radio spots, you know what I mean? And I really want to do this. I'm thinking of getting a picture of you guys, give them out to people, commemorative thing, And he's like, well, that's great. What do you estimate it's going to be? Yeah, he gives him an estimate. He says, go to the money and take it. He says, because he wasn't asking for himself, he was asking for the king. We mentioned this years ago. Zachreinu l'chayim, melech chafetz v'chayim, v'kosveinu b'sefer ha'chayim, lemancha elokim chayim. Give me life so that I can live a meaningful life for you. And that's ultimately what we're asking for. When we look at these simanim and we say, get rid of our enemies, give us bracha, give us sweetness, give us everything like this, what do we want it for? And that's what I said all the way at the beginning when I talked about a cheshbon nefesh. Yeah? We go into Rosh Hashanah, and we're going to, especially when we eat the simanim, this is what the focus is supposed to be. What kind of a year do I want? What am I looking for? And you have to think about it. What kind of a life do I want for myself and for my family, for my community, and for Klal Yisrael? I'm going to dive into Kadosh Baruch Hu. And by the way, do not make the mistake for a moment of thinking that your tefillahs cannot change the situation that we presently live in. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was once someplace, and a guy, was giving his little drasha. And afterwards he says, like the Gemara says, Altia Birchas Hedjit Kala Be'inav, the bracha of a simple person shouldn't be small in your eyes. And Shlomo Zalman interrupted him and said, no. You didn't read the Gemara well. That was talking about the bracha that was given by Goyim. There you can talk about a Birchas Hedjit. Every Jew has the power to bless. Every one of us has the power of bracha. I spoke about this years ago, but, Henoch Leibowitz, Shiva Chavetz Chaim, asked the question. He says, we blow one last shofar blow. Right? Then we don't have to. One long shofar blow. Why? To confuse the Satan. So he said, it's 2,000 years. The Satan's still falling for the same trick. Tell him to buy an art scroll. Take a look. He knows. It's going to be there. Year after year, he gets nervous each time. And he said, the Satan's not stupid. We are. Because if you knew how close you were to turning that shofar into the shofar of Mashiach, you'd understand where the Satan was afraid. We have that opportunity to make that shofar, this Rosh Hashanah, us. The Yetzer Hara more than anything wants you to believe that you can't make a difference. That's a mistake. You have the power to change the world. And that's why more than anything, the Yetzer Hara wants to convince you that you're not worth anything and that you're not going to make any difference. It's a mistake. Your tefillas will change the world, you know? And in case you don't appreciate it, I want you to realize that the people in this room are among the top 5% of committed Jews in the world. Because the fact that you're here probably means that this is not your country of origin. That means you care so much about Yahadus that you gave up your country of origin, you know, most of you came from a first world country, you know, and you come here, Ra'anana, a beautiful city. I'm certainly digging the weather. You know what I mean? This is like the 18th heat wave of the summer, you know what I mean? You know? And it's nice, keeps you roasty toasty, you know what I mean? And we don't speak the language. We don't have all the protexia. You know, in Israel, if you have connections, you know, we call it protexia. In America, we call it corruption and you go to jail. But here, we came up with a nicer word for it. We call it protexia, you know what I mean? You know, we come in, you know, we don't have anything, you know? We've made that decision. And where are we, you know, in the evening? We're singing a kollel, listening to a shir. I mean, you don't realize this because everybody, you know, the Yetzer Hara always tries to beat you down, you know, and sometimes he comes dressed as people too. But you don't understand that the fact that you have this level of commitment makes you part of the top 5% of Klal Yisrael. So who do you think HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be looking at most closely this Rosh Hashanah to hear what you have to say? What would you like for the Jewish people this coming year? And we could think small, you know. I'd be happy if the Hidabroot just cleared up, you know what I mean? It comes every winter, you know. I'd be happy if I had a parking space, you know what I mean? I'd be happy if, you know what I mean, I could buy something in this country without the owner of the store making it feel like he's doing me a personal favor. You know what I mean? In America, they're so happy when you walk in the store. Here, I can walk into my collet, and the owner's like leaning on the refrigerator. I'm like, can I get something? You know, so finally goes, okay, you know, he did me a big favor. He let me buy something. You know what I mean? You know, just once, we have small thoughts. Gosh, this Rosh Hashanah, is everyone here going to be thinking, I want to save Klal Yisrael from that bomb in Iran? Are you thinking about all the people who need shidduchim and all the couples who want to have children? Are you thinking about all the kids who are struggling, whether or not they're going to go off the derech or not? Are you thinking about all the people who are sick, you know, or have children who are sick? Are you thinking about all the people who can't put food on their table? Are you thinking about all the problems that are going on in Klal Yisrael? Because you're the one that God's going to be listening to your tefillahs this Rosh Hashanah, and you're going to tell him what you want. And we're going to eat those simanim, not because they're sweet and they're cute, but because I want to be a Rosh for Lila Zanav, and we're talking about all Klal Yisrael. We want to be the head. Everyone already holds us to a higher standard than everybody else. We might as well be it, you know? You know, we want to destroy our enemies. Krolenu, yeah? Yeah, itamu sonenu. And get rid of them. You know, they stop everything. We have the power to change the course of history. We can turn this year into whatever year we want. That's the power that we have. My friends, it is, as I mentioned at the beginning, a schus to have the opportunity to come and to be part of the programming. And all I can say is that next year we should have the schus that if Mashiach hasn't come, at least we'll sit down at the end of the year and review a year that was filled with simcha and bracha and metikus. Ksivach simatayva.